George. Thanks for joining us, and can't wait to have you on and hear what you've been up to lately.
Good morning, Kai. How are you?
Doing great.
Great to be here this morning. And, I've been thinking back in time for the period of time that we've been dealing with your group, Kai, and Soar Financial, dating back to, in fact, the Integra Gold days. And, you've always been a loyal supporter, as been your followers have done the same. So I thought I'd do something a little bit different this morning, Kai, which is not give the same old presentation that I give every week, in seemingly what seems like an endless sort of format of presentations and online conferences. Maybe focus a bit more this morning on what's occupying our consciousness right now at Delamar, and focusing specifically on Florida Mountain. But anyway, we really appreciate the support, Kai, from you and your followers, and maybe sort of allow me to walk you all down the road of what we're kind of thinking about right now with respect to Florida. Yeah, we'll get to the elements of the exploration program, the fact that we've added a bunch of drills on site now just very recently. Black Sheep success, yeah, that's great. We'll talk a little bit about that. The PFS, that's all trucking on schedule. That's everything that's happening there is happening the way it should be. But maybe focusing a bit more attention this morning on Florida Mountain. And I'm just going to jump to the presentation now and maximize the screen. So there we go. So I'm going to dispense with a lot of the sort of the motherhood things with respect to Integra. You know who we are. You know where we come from, the legacy, the scarcity of assets in the Western U.S. specifically. I've shown this slide many times before. Maybe just jump to the PA and what to expect with respect to the upcoming PFS. So here's a snapshot in time of what the PEA looked like a couple of years ago at $1,350 gold, $1,690 silver. We were able to generate a pretty healthy NPV and IRR from the project back in the day for a project that would only cost about $160 million US to build. And that was really important for us back in the day because we wanted to demonstrate to our shareholders what kind of project we would ourselves could afford to finance and what kind of project we would build. Not necessarily the largest project that might be to come in the upcoming PFS. We are guiding on a production profile that looks certainly better than 124,000 ounces per year, which is what the PEA showed. But more on that to come. I think I'm going to focus more attention, however, as I mentioned earlier on Florida Mountain this time around. So just to situate you all geographically, there's Boise. To drive to site, basically it's a pretty easy drive along an interstate and then a secondary road into site. There's Delamar, that's 3.3 million ounces of gold equivalent. Florida Mountain, where we'd be talking a lot more about this morning, sits right there. That's 1.1 million ounces of gold equivalent. War Eagle, not a resource yet, but probably something with more drilling, we could get ourselves there. And these new discovery areas up in Black Sheep. So just focusing on Florida Mountain specifically right now. So this is a drone view of Florida Mountain from the west looking east, basically looking at a longitudinal view, if you will, of the deposit, with the top of the deposit basically sitting at the top of the old high wall of what Kinross used to mine successfully over the period of about 10 years at the top of Florida Mountain. The bottom of the resource would be sitting right about there, right below that haulage road. So, for our followers, you would know that the bulk tonnage low-grade resource sits right at the top of the mountain, and it sits at really the apex of that hill, which runs north-northwest. So, if you would recall from some of our disclosure previously, we started hitting high grade, I would say, in about 2019. In an effort to better define the top of the hill, we started to hit some really spectacular grades. Evidence of high grade coming right up to the top of the volcanic pile into the felsic volcanics that host the bulk tonnage low grade gold silver. And so we started to kind of piece together, what could this start to look like outside of the resource model, down into the mountain, down into the depths of the mountain where the old timers used to mine. And we know that they used to pull out some spectacular grades. We know that they had a minimum 15 gram per ton cutoff. The average grades that we see frequently in the literature from Florida Mountain talk about 30, 60 grams per ton. And so we started to drill beneath the resource, and I'll show you what that looks like digitally. But what we found is there was a direct correlation between what we were hitting at the top of the mountain And these adits that you see that dot the countryside, and as I scroll around, as I turn this drone image around, you can see these adits are literally everywhere. And this is what the old timers used to access these high grade veins underground. One vein specifically, the trade dollar blackjack vein, which we know was mined partially. We know that there are 6 other veins that are parallel to that main structure, and that's essentially what we've been hitting. So just zooming into Florida Mountain from a digital perspective. And so what you see there is the Florida Mountain digital model. That is essentially, the red is the oxide, the green is transitional, and the blue is the sulfide mineralization. That was the subject of our PEA a couple of years ago, and that's 1.1 million ounces of gold equivalent. But as I mentioned, we started to drill outside of the resource model, even back in 2019, and we started to hit these really spectacular grades, 1.5 meters to up to 5 meters, going 10, 15, 20 grams per ton gold, thousands of grams per ton of silver in some cases. So we started to kind of get a view of, there's this high grade potential. The what ifs started to occupy our consciousness. What if there is a high grade resource there? How would it impact future production scenarios in terms of what would it add to bulk open pit mining, for example? And so, as we continued to progress the model, we got further and further outside of the resource, started to intercept more spectacular grades. And our hit rate is now kind of approaching the 70% level, which is really, really interesting from an exploration perspective. Those of you would know, when you're firing essentially blindly into areas of resource projection outside of a known resource, and you're hitting high grade gold 70% of the time, that's a pretty good hit rate. So that's essentially what's been happening. And just to show you, a few more grades, some of them from the recent intercepts that we had announced recently. So what that forced us to do was do a bit of a compilation, and we put that compilation in our last disclosure, in our last press release. So what you're looking at here is a plan view, basically a slice at close to the top of the mountain of the high grade intercepts that we've been able to compile. And on the right hand side and in the slide to come, you'll see some spectacular grades of gold and silver that make up this new interpretation that you see here. So you can see a definite pattern, a definite north-northwest striking pattern of high grade gold with subsidiary veins in the form of splays that make up this deposit. And we know that that carries on to depth because we are intersecting it at a hit rate of about 70%. So what this allows us to do is dream. And what we're dreaming about now is, what could this look like in a future resource based on the geometries that are there? How could we get these intercepts into a resource first, and then subject to successful resource identification, what would this look like in a mine plan? And then further, what could this look like when added, again, subject to future studies and success, what could it look like when added to the bulk tonnage open pit production scenarios that we've highlighted previously? This is yet another set of assays that make up this new model that we're putting together. So you're basically getting a look for the first time, essentially, at what we're thinking from a high grade perspective outside of the known resource. I don't need to tell you, you can probably dream for yourselves what a high grade underground mining situation, again, subject to underground exploration, subject to putting into studies, what that could add to the current, say, 125,000 ounces that the PEA talked about a couple of years ago. It adds a lot, but we have to get there. We have to get there through further exploration. And we're starting to dream about what could an underground exploration program look like at Florida Mountain. And perhaps it could look like something like this. You would have to go underground because that would be the optimal way of exploring these veins and getting them into a resource. You would have to go underground from an adit that would possibly use an existing entry point, same way the old timers approached these veins back in the day. And then you would have to drill fans of holes to get this into A, a resource category, and then B, into perhaps a development study thereafter. So these are things that are occupying our consciousness right now, and really exciting times. We've got some internal studies on the go that are quite exciting. Hopefully more on that a bit later on this year. Jumping into the kind of the mega view of what Florida Mountain looks like, well, we've got a big soil geochem anomaly that basically outlines the resource expansion potential here. So this is the deposit footprint that you see right there. And we've got this big plume of soil geochem. And in this case, this is gold. Lots of drilling to be done outside of this area. Specifically this area, we've talked about high-grade projections of these zones, these plunging chutes beneath the deposit, but even laterally, lots of potential. This area, in fact, of dark-colored purple, is an area called Florida Keys, which we'll be drilling this coming spring. And I should say we've got 2 drill rigs in operation up at Florida Mountain now. So exciting times at Florida Mountain. Now, with respect to other things, I'm just going to jump quickly to other areas. We've talked a lot about Florida Mountain, just briefly to touch on other areas. Now, we've also discussed in our recent disclosure and press releases the fact that we do believe now that the continuation of Delamar deposit is basically to the northwest in a series of graben structures on the edge of the volcanic complex. And we've proved that with some really interesting drilling. So our first holes at the Georgiana area, for example, obtained boxes and boxes of this kind of core. And really exciting stuff. We ended up releasing to our shareholders at the beginning of the year these potentially bulk mineable, certainly thicknesses that would indicate that, gold and silver mineralization in our very first holes in an area that's about 30 square kilometers. So really exciting stuff. Lots more to do there at Georgiana. Areas like Lucky Days, and further to the north in the really big soil geochem anomalies, which for now are untested in areas like Twin Peaks and Statute Hills. So lots on the go there. And then just kind of moving lastly to War Eagle, lots to talk about there. We'll be drilling there this coming summer. We've generated a lot of interest in the past from some of these drill intercepts. Some of them you can see right there. Longitudinally, what we're looking at here is something very similar to Florida Mountain, plunging chutes of high grade. This is about 400 meters of separation between the two. There's probably another chute that's developing there, and completely open to the north and to the south. And so lots to be done there. Not enough drilling to put into a resource category, but like Florida Mountain, we've got the secret sauce down in terms of where these zones are heading, and more drilling to come on that end. And just to kind of end off here with respect to what's going on with the de-risking studies, the pre-feasibility study that's on the go. Lots of work in terms of metallurgy, engineering studies, geotechnical drilling on the go. So everything's on track for that PFS in the 4th quarter of this year. So Kai, over to you if you've got any questions. I hope I didn't break the bank in terms of time here.
No, you did fantastic. Thanks so much, George. It's great. I love when people use Verify. So I've said that before, but it's game changing. So glad you incorporated that. Drilling real quick, like what's the overall plan for this year in terms of like meters and holes in total? Like, because you are doing a lot of things simultaneously.
Yeah, so last week, Kai, we announced the expansion of our rig count, essentially. So we started the year with 2 true rigs in operation. Started to get to this hit rate at Florida Mountain of high grade, Black Sheep making these new discoveries. Really sort of realized that 2 rigs doesn't do this project justice. We just keep kind of expanding these areas. So we added another 2 rigs. So certainly, you know, the 10,000 meters that we announced at the beginning of the year is going to grow. And, you know, look out for in future news releases what size of exploration program expansion that we're contemplating right now, but certainly there will be an expansion there.
Okay. And now how many meters do you need, or like what's the drill spacing need to be to get to a certain production level confidence?
Well, so in terms of the existing resources, the bulk tonnage low grade, those are drilled out. There's no more drilling that needs to be done there. We got more than enough resource in an M&I category to deal with. In terms of what we're looking at Florida Mountain, you know, on a very preliminary basis, these high grade chutes would probably need to be drilled off on a 30-meter spacing to start with. In order to get into a resource category. And in order to get there, most optimally, you'd have to do that from underground. And then thereafter, you'd probably have to do tighter space drilling to convert.
George, I really appreciate you joining us this morning. It was fantastic having you on.